Okay, welcome everybody to, I believe, our 31st Two Autumns reading. Our first Zoom reading. Today, the reading is with four fantastic poets, haiku poets, and I'm going to let Sharon Preddy, she is going to be our MC today. She also is the editor of the Filling the Sky anthology, and I'm going to introduce her to you. Sharon has been delighted to be a member of HVNC for the last decade. Her work has appeared in Frog Pond, Modern Haiku, Acorn, Mariposa, and other journals. She is a Touchstone Award winner and was chosen as a new Renaissance 11 poet in 2019. She is also a writer of full-length poetry. Her upcoming publications will appear in the Belvedere Literary Review and the Healing Muse. She works as a medical social worker in San Francisco and has had the great pleasure of leading a poetry group of her patients for over 20 years. Here's Sharon.
Thank you, Gary. Hi, everybody. And it's so great to see you all today. And thanks so much for coming. We've waited a year for this, but I'm really glad we're able to do it today. So I really want to start by thanking the HPNC for asking me to be the poetry editor for this year's anthology. I'm really glad I said yes. It's been a very inspiring and meaningful experience to me. Once I had all the poets' poems in hand to start looking through, the pandemic had arrived. So those poems, their work really became a refuge for me and an anchor in those first few months when everybody's world was turning upside down. So very grateful to the poets and their poems. And it was a real honor and a real privilege to be immersed in the work of these four wonderful poets. And each poet gave me a very distinct world, very different perspectives that surprised me, delighted me, and really helped me think about how I move through the world and what I choose to notice. So my thanks to them for entrusting me with their work and for being patient, so patient with this process. A big thank you to Sue Antolin for all the production work she did, the book design, working with the printers. You would not be holding this book in your hand without Sue's help. So I really appreciate your dedication and enthusiasm, Sue. Helped so much. And a special thank you to Chuck Brickley. He sat with me at Orson's Belly Cafe before the pandemic hit and shared his insights and tips about his experience of being an editor for the 2A anthology. And that really helped me. It really helped me get on my way to this process. Lastly, a big thank you to my wonderful husband, Richard, for helping with the cover and the cover design. I was so happy with it, and I think it's really beautiful. So we will start with our first poet, who is going to be David Lecount. He was interviewed by Chuck Brickley a while ago for an HSA article. And it was there that I learned that he's been writing haiku almost every day of his life, which was astounding to me and so impressive. Now, I mistakenly interpreted that as one poem a day. That is incorrect. It's actually 8 poems a day, so even more impressive. He refers to his haiku practice as a calling, and I understand that calling, that dedication, is reflected in the thick, large notebooks that line his living room shelves. So it was a real joy to experience that dedication when I read through his poems and when I saw the very tender attention he gives to the world around him, whether that's a flea or a fish or the colors of sunset. So quite a privilege. So David has lived in California and Alaska. He received an MFA from the University of Massachusetts. He has lived in Santa Cruz Mountains for 40 years. He's written many haiku since 1980 and 10 books, including one with a preface by James Hackett, who I understand was also his neighbor at one time. He's won a grand prize in Japan's haiku contest. He's also won an NEA fellowship, did consultation for Stanford Center for Education Research, and earned an Inspirational Teacher of the Year from UC Santa Cruz. So David, take it away.
And David, you need to hit your unmute button.
Okay, everybody got me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm very sorry. Obviously, this is my first time with this kind of communications, and I appreciate everybody helping me down the way. Particularly the quality of the help has just been wonderful and admirable, and I'm honored to be here. Actually, I wish I had gotten this done right with a laptop, but anyway, I'm holding my iPhone in my hand and I'm able to communicate that way if everybody can still hear me. Chuck has been a real help to me as well. He's sort of given me advice on which poems to use and how to do it. I wish I'd done a better job to thank him. Anyway, I have a preface that I want to read before I read my poems. And this is something that I wrote for a contest probably 30 or 40 years ago. And it goes like this. For some time, I have tried to imagine what the American listener thinks when first hearing a haiku read aloud. Is it, what did he mean by that, Ethel? Or is it, after the brevity, is that all? Also, likely, what a pretentious piece of obscurantia. Now let's get on to the real poem. It may feel like listening to a mushroom in the rain. I too have doubts that they can be read aloud because of what they are. Under their skin abides an inchoate silence. They bear their own need for silence like a bedtime prayer. They are the cracking wrinkles on the plastic doll your wife keeps in the attic from her childhood. They are putting your dad to bed and kissing him good night when he has Alzheimer's. They are the sound and the fury of daily meetings where confusion merges one path into another. They wheeze like an asthmatic child slapped on the back. They grapple with eternity without despairing of the simplest words. They are wisdom's sweetest nonsense. Haiku, too, are the glow from the lightning bug that flees at last a child's fingers. They are the wind that suffuses its ripples along sand dunes, sharpening them as it goes. They are the muted breath that whispers, I love you, and then, like that, are gone. Anyway, I now will proceed with some of the poems that I selected for this reading. Cartwheeling in the Wind, a heart-shaped candy box. Cartwheeling in the wind, a heart-shaped candy box. Rainy sundial, where the rust lies, what hour is it? Rainy sundial, where the rust lies, what hour is it? 3 kisses into the mirror to shape her lipstick just right. 3 kisses into the mirror to shape her lipstick just right. Old stairs, the creek, theirs or mine? Alone, the company too good to share. Alone, the company too good to share. In every raindrop, hear the throbbing Eden, just as it was then. In every raindrop, hear the throbbing Eden, just as it was then. Faculty meetings, announcing that announcements will be made. Faculty meeting, announcing that announcements will be made. Having stolen the rose, I have nowhere to wear it without shame. Having stolen the rose, I have nowhere to wear it without shame. Let the turkey gobble, we have in common fearless nonsense. Let the turkey gobble, we have in common fearless nonsense. Where the river widens, a swimming hole, naked as stones. Where the river widens, a swimming hole, naked as stones. On the back of my neck, as I dig, the scarecrow's cold breath. On the back of my neck, as I dig, the scarecrow's cold breath. Pencil sharpener. The smell of fresh shavings makes me a student again. Pencil sharpener. The smell of fresh shavings makes me a student again. Lost in my pocket between lint and coins, a faint scribble saying why I'm here. Lost in my pocket between lint and coins, a faint scribble saying why I'm here. Suddenly sharing salmon berries with a grizzly, that close to his flies. Suddenly sharing salmon berries with a grizzly, that close to his flies. Baling wire holding the fence up, the fence holding up the wire. Baling wire holding the fence up, the fence holding up the wire. Drink slowly the stream, in it is the upland throat chill of upland snow. Drink slowly the stream, in it is the sudden throat chill of upland snow. Bamboo flute, the lingering ache and echo of autumn wind. Bamboo flute, the lingering ache and echo of autumn wind. In the bear's footprints, I walked the empty beach, not fitting in. In the bear's footprints,
All right, so we will have Patricia Reed. I've been a big fan of Patricia and her work for a very long time. And that just made it a thrill to be surrounded by her poetry and also her vision of the world. I am always astounded by the depth of feeling that she brings into each poem, and also her word choice, her image choice. All of those combine to make such a rich and vital poem, and she makes it look so effortless on the page. So truly inspiring. She began writing haiku in 1975 with Kiyosho and Kyoko Tokotomi, founders of the Yuki-Teiki Society. She has 2 books of haiku, Blush of Winter Moon and Utopia, She Hurries On. She's also a visual artist, because many people know, and she has 4 books of haiku. She's a brush painter and a printmaker, and I think we're all very privileged to have her, both her visual work and her written work. So Patricia, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm going to share some of my presentation, put my presentation on the screen. I hope this works now. Can you see this? Does it work? Okay, good. As Sharon said, I've been writing since 1975, starting out with the Tokotomis. But first, I'd like to thank HPNC for having this 2 Autumns reading and including me in it. And I'm very privileged to get to read with David. I hope to hear the rest of his reading. Crystal and John. It's a great privilege to be with these wonderful poets. I'd also like to say how much I appreciate all of the members of HPNC coming to haiku. One of the great joys of coming to haiku is the friendships that you make along the haiku path. So many wonderful people who enjoy the same thing and want to think deeper about their lives. That's a true, true privilege to have so many wonderful friends. And speaking of the haiku journey, this reading today has given me a chance to think about this path that I've been on now for, I don't know, 40 some years. To think about it and what has happened to me along the way and how haiku has affected my life. And I wanted to share that with you today. This book, Blush of Winter Moon, was published in 2001. So I had been writing for 26 years. In my early writing, I worked mostly in fixed form, 5/7/5 or 3/5/3. And I will show you some of my early work. The merry-go-round starts up with a long shudder, beginning of spring. This haiku was published, one of my first haiku to be published, and it was published by Gary Gay, Jerry Ball, and Tom Tico in the San Francisco Anthology. So it's a big favorite of mine, as is that book. Midsummer Garden, no matter how beautiful, I am not consoled. In my early life, or the 1990s, I lost my oldest son. He had a heart attack unexpectedly. And this writing came out of that experience. Riding the last train, I peer into the long night, my own reflection. This goes back to my childhood in Kennebec, South Dakota. I've forgotten what the name of the train company was, but they were canceling the passenger trains coming through town. And my parents bought my sister, brother, and myself a ticket to ride on the last train for the 10 miles between Kennebec and Preface. And I remember so vividly how I was looking forward to looking out the window and seeing the prairie as we went by. It was 7 o'clock at night. And of course, the train car was lit up. And if you looked out the window, all you could see was your own reflection. That has lasted with me forever, the memory of that. In the 2000s, early 2000s, I began a collaboration with Loy Zitten, the artist, a watercolor artist who painted birds, and Martha Dolan, a calligrapher. And together we published 3 books. Morning coolness wraps each forest thing in quiet. Indian summer, suddenly a message from out of the blue. And the second book, Wild Heart of One Bird Singing, was published 2 years later. Beyond the rainbow, I never dreamed there'd be barbed wire. Late afternoon sun, everything, even the heads of birds, tinged with autumn. And the third book, Yardbirds, the Impertinence of Ordinary, was published in 2017. All these many springs, and still we enjoy chats on the veranda. Obon Festival, for the first time, learning the dance step. Aren't those quails just so charming? I love them. And they look like they're dancing, don't they? And the poem is rendered, that's not a font, that's Martha's calligraphy, her beautiful light touch. It's almost as if the words were going to fly, feels like to me. And during this same time period, I was studying brush painting with Master Pei Jianho, a very famous Chinese brush painter. I was very, very privileged to get to study with him. And this book is a series of paintings painted in an accordion book that's 1 foot by 2 feet. When you open it up, the format is 1 foot by 2 feet. And there were, I think, 10 or 12 pages. Oops, excuse me. Autumn deepens. In forest quiet, a heart listens to itself. In the fairy tale, there is always a stranger. Autumn loneliness. And finally, my second book, Utopia, She Hurries On, published by Swamp Press in 2017. And this book has artwork, prints, basically. Most of them monotypes, but a few with etchings. For instance, this cover is this is a monotype in the background, and then 3 etchings printed over it. Hydrangea over tea, mulling the idea of utopia. Moonset, the spot where she left us to join the sea. We lost Jane Reichold. The sea. One butter knife, all the silver that remains. Evening snow. Winter seclusion. The dishwasher begins the rinse cycle. She stops me from picking a lemon. It's asleep, she says. This poem won the Touchstone Award. Tulip magnolia, the shape of laughter, the shape of tears. In my 7th decade, I stand in solidarity with the autumn wind. And now I'm starting my 8th decade. She hurries on without a backward glance, fragrance of peonies. And last year, I was given the wonderful gift by Yukiteke Haiku Society to publish my book on writing haiku. Something, of course, that I've been thinking about over all these years and writing about and talking about. And now it was published last year for their 45th anniversary. I'm going to read you just an excerpt from that book, just to give you a taste. There are chapters on every aspect or element of writing haiku, including on form. And this is reflection of finding the form for haiku and my own experience writing in fixed form. So which comes first, form or content? Poets have approached the issue from both directions. There is no correct answer. For some poets, having the form as a starting point is easier. For others, the content. I have experimented extensively with both approaches. Using the 5-7-5 and the 3-5-3 forms, I've written more than 500 poems over quite a span of time. By focusing on one form or the other, I was able to learn some things. One, the more I wrote, the more easily words fell into the chosen pattern. And 2, the capabilities of the form, its strengths and its limitations became apparent. For example, I discovered that the 5-7-5 structure accommodates a more complex vocabulary. Words with Latin roots, abstractions, for instance. Evoking clusters of algebraic symbols, scent of tangerine. Absent-mindedly eating a ripe persimmon in the poet's house. Whereas the 3-5-3 structure best serves pithy words of Anglo-Saxon origin. Champagne brunch. A woman in jade eats a peach. This book that I just talked about was finished during the COVID pandemic. Also during the COVID pandemic, I started writing 10 haiku a day. I really admire David writing 8 haiku a day for years. I have in the last year and a half in writing 10 haiku a day. This practice has kept me sane and helped me keep in touch with my life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the ordinary and the extraordinary, and even the horrific. In the last few weeks, and even the last few days, we have been inundated with shocking sights. While we might feel powerless to help solve the issues, we can, through witnessing, honor the people who have lost their lives in the last few days. The Americans, the Afghans, even the Haitians, by bearing witness to what they have endured. And it is in that sense that I present these 4 haiku. American adventurism. A red moon sets on Kabul. The mob clamors to board a C-17. Ashes, ashes, they all fall down. A forever war. What does it mean to the man with PTSD? Roar of wind and waves cannot drown out the sadness. And now I'd like to thank, from the bottom of my heart, Sharon Preddy, as the editor of this wonderful book, Filling in the Sky, and Susan Antolin, who designed it, and Richard Goldman, with a beautiful color cover, using a photograph from Koglar Oske. I hope I said his name correctly. Thank you for all your work and for making this truly a beautiful book. I will treasure it. Corollary to this morning's breeze, butterfly. Lost pinwheel, the wind finds it, plays with it. Daily news of the coronavirus, a sinking kite. shooting star, and arrow into autobiography, which today you have given me the opportunity to do 12 into my biography. With great appreciation to HPNC, to Sharon, to Susan, and to all my haiku friends.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you so much for such a beautiful, beautiful and moving reading. I'm gonna do a round of applause. And thank you for sharing your life experience really in coming through so beautifully in each and every poem. Absolutely moving and inspiring. Thank you. Everybody. So our next poet and reader is Crystal Simone Smith. When I read through Crystal's poems, they were like walking through doorways to me. And once on the other side, I found I could kind of dwell in the experience of each poem. And it was just lovely. I was so very impressed by her ability to deftly write about personal, intimate issues, but also topical ones. Searing events that occur to our communities, to our country. Crystal's poems are very powerful, and I think a lot of that comes from her very visible talent of what she's able to leave unsaid. She is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Routes Home and Running Music. She's also the author of Wildflowers, Haiku, Senryu, and Haibun. Her work has appeared in numerous journals, including Kalaloo, Nimrod, Barrow Street, Frog Pond, and Modern Haiku. She's an alumna of the Kalaloo Creative Writing Workshop and the Yale Summer Writers Conference. She holds an MFA from Queen's University of Charlotte and lives in Durham, North Carolina with her husband, 2 sons, where she teaches writing. And she's also the managing editor of Backbone Press. So Crystal, please.
Remember to unmute myself. Everybody can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Gary, for inviting me to be part of this reading and this anthology. A very, very beautiful book, Sharon. I was very impressed when I got it. I do love aesthetics. Beautiful book. And I'm so happy to be with these poets who have been writing haiku for what feels like decades. And I started in 2014. So I've been writing haiku for less than a decade. But I did sort of dive in with the mentoring of Leonard Moore. And I just wrote consistently for a year. And then after that, it just sort of became this practice like it is with you all. I don't know how much haiku I've written at this point, but it has opened my world up a great deal as an artist because I was a free verse poet before. I still write free verse. But haiku is that's a different practice, and it's been wonderful. I received a Duke University fellowship to write all last year, haiku. And so I did quite a bit of that actually, and a new book will be coming out, will be released spring of 2022. So it's exciting time. So I'm going to read the selection that's here in the anthology, and then I'll read just a couple of poems from my first book that you mentioned, Sharon. And then I'm going to read something that I wrote in that fellowship at Duke. You'll note that some of my haiku is political, which is not typical of haiku. We tend to sort of stay away from that sometimes, but I'm all in when I write, and I'm very much inside my writing. So you'll see me there, you'll hear me there, and it's hard to keep my politics out of my poems sometimes. Election night map. The bloody South remains bloody. tide pool, the silent panic of silver fish. Glowing embers, my sun erases and starts again. Rough turbulence, I switch the playlist to gospel. Cold ginkgo walk, in our watery eyes, the seascape. Hailstorm, the therapist and I part ways. Car ferry ride, weighing my life choices. Star-shaped snowflake, a smile amidst teenage angst. Prayer channel, the lava lamp dies. Brutal summer, I grow tired of half-mast flags. Peace Day, he hands me a dethorned rose. The Big Dipper, I send the itinerary to myself. I would like to say that Car Ferry Ride and the Big Dipper were written at CBEC. I received an invitation by Michael to come there, I think maybe 3 years ago, had to be about 3 years ago now, to speak. And it was wonderful. It was so beautiful. Every time I go to I live on the East Coast, but every time I go to the West Coast, it is immense beauty. I'm so jealous that you all get to live there. I'm also going to read a few from Wildflowers. I don't know if you guys, some of you may own this. I'll put a link in the chat to my website where you can purchase it if you like. These are early poems for me. These are some of the first haiku that I ever wrote. And I received a grant from an individual who, he's a poet here in Durham, but he heard me read the haiku, and at a reading, I don't know what I was just randomly reading haiku, but he said, I want to offer you a grant so you can put this into a book, because they're wonderful. They need to be in a book. And I thought, oh, thank you so much. That's lovely of you. Rain mist, needing the sister I stopped speaking to. Wednesday morning, driving in, then out of fog. Ocean balcony, down miles of shoreline, silent fireworks. Lost in the city, quarreling under one umbrella. Winter beach, a golden retriever runs off his leash. Game delay, we toss and catch peanuts in our mouths. Spring break, my boys screaming at blue jays. Another mass shooting. My son practices his trumpet solo. So I was given a fellowship at Duke University, a year research fellowship, to write or compose African-American haiku about slavery, quite specific. And Duke has an amazing archive of slavery memorabilia and documentation and bills of sales. So it's a very different way of writing haiku. Instead of having that moment in nature, that aha moment. Your moment is when you encounter the archive, you encounter the artifact, and you write in response to that. So it was quite different, but I wrote a lot of haiku. Hopefully you'll see some of that out and about in some of the journals as I continue to submit that. That book will be released, as I said, in the fall of spring of next year. But obviously, as I was researching and looking at all these artifacts and just really knee deep into the institution of slavery, which was a very difficult task for me, I obviously became curious about my own ancestry. And so I took one of those days and it just sort of randomly happened. And I started to research on one of the ancestry.com sites or whatever, research my own history in terms of my connection to slavery. So I wanted to read that haiku. It's a haiku, so I'm going to maybe break the rules here a little bit. I'm going to read this haiku. It's called Haiku for Ancestor Ernestine Turner, born 1827. A damp darkness fell upon me last night as I sat lost in a day of finding ancestors. From sunup, I combed through slavery records on the internet. Finally, there she was, suspended in a database tree where the races blended and our dark skin began. She is not locatable in the census. She is the grandmother of my great-great-grandfather and the property of a white man. He is listed as the father of her 6 children. She is scarcely listed by first name only, with a date of birth. Here, where my family tree changes shade, consentingly or not. Evening downpour, a screech owl changes trees. Thank you, guys.
Wow, thank you so much, Crystal. Your poems are riveting. I don't know how else to describe them. Just riveting and beautiful and just wonderful to hear out loud. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. So we're going to have John Stevenson as our next poet. I think you're all familiar with John, one of our haiku luminaries. It was a real honor to have time with John's poems and poems he'd written throughout many decades. So I felt like I was walking along with him a little bit through his past, and that was a big treat. His range of topics just really amazed me and impressed me. His innovation, his humor, and his insights in his poems really made me think more and made me think more about my own writing, how I approach it, and also made me think more about how I take in the writing of others. So it was a really wonderful process, John. John has been writing and publishing poetry for 64 years. He is a former president of the Haiku Society of America and former editor of Frog Pond. And since 2008, he served as the managing editor for the Heron's Nest. So John, the floor is yours.
Not feeling good or bad enough for poetry. Why haiku? There are so many of us. If even a small part want to be heard, it seems only fair to be brief. The lakeside weekend, mayflies. Old slippers, the comfort coming apart. A deep gorge, some of the silence is me. One last look through the old apartment, a dry sponge. Oscar night, adjusting the cuffs of my pajamas. Reversible jacket, the side I always show. Pretty sure my red is your red. Nothing matters how green it gets. A big diamond. Just imagine the pressure. One of your size has stayed with me 40 years so far. Banquet table, just out of reach, the good conversation. Winter night, the irrational is where the warmth is. More automatic words about weapons. Lonely having the best memory. They rise from the opposite bank. They rise from the opposite bank of the river. Everyone around me is asleep. The muffled sounds wake no one. Night train, the fireworks you missed. Stick figures, including one I recognize. Thin, green, as if we never happened. Expecting no one arrives. Writers' conference. From a toilet stall, I hear someone quoting me. A child's art. The tulips tower over everything. Without a pause, the rest of the story to someone else. We're here. We might as well build a sandcastle. My hands at rest in dishwater. First hummingbird. Dandelion wishes. The wind makes most of them. A small favor, repaid in zucchini. End of summer. The warmth of a borrowed shirt. Checkout line. My dad could talk to anyone. Voices coming from the next apartment. Used to be us.
Last piece of a jigsaw puzzle, filling in the sky. Spring. There is no fence or enclosing wall, no waste of space or undue sentiment. Country graveyard. The close pass of a plow. Obituary photos. No one looks surprised. A deep bruise I don't remember getting. Autumn evening. Home and homesick. All night diner. Fresh snow. Sadness for the old sadness. Fruitcake. A friendship that never changes. Putting them away, I hope my clothes were good enough. After the day of the funeral, the night. Her soup making fills the apartment. Autumn evening. Seeing in her way, it must have been lonely living with me. Since you moved, just a road I don't go down. Groundhog Day. It doesn't matter what I see. Thin winter coat. So little protection against her boyfriend. Almost spring. She tells the whole story in a single breath. Lift a pencil, and the poem floats away. Embarrassed by the lavish praise I imagine getting. Autumn wind, the leaves are going where I'm going. Done blooming, the peonies unbend. Wish. What was it? You only know that you were on the verge of something and that it seemed to promise some kind of pleasure. Back you go, seeking it, unswinging wish to thought reason in previous thoughts, quite lost. Lake light, a hummingbird at the feeder. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, John. You are a true testament as to why poetry needs to be heard out loud. Just beautiful, beautiful reading. Thank you. Do we have David back? Do we know?
David, if you're able to hear us and unmute, please do so.
Maybe not any word from David, Chuck, you know?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, but first I just want to say thank you to all of the readers. Thank you to everyone that helped make today possible and the book possible, and Sharon, fantastic work. So thank you all so much.
And my thanks as well to everybody for coming and participating. And if I had had to pick 12 poems from these 4 poets, just by hearing them out loud, I never could have done it. So it was really a real treat. You really brought the anthology to life by us hearing your poems. And I feel like I'm holding a living object after hearing you all read. So thank you to everybody. Wonderful.
And I wanted to, in my reading, only speak the words that I'd written, but I don't want you to leave without also hearing that I'm grateful for Sharon's work and for the work of all the organizers here. As this is my second experience with Two Autumns, and always something goes wrong. In the first reading that I gave in 2008, I was in the middle of the reading, and the microphone that they had came loose and tilted against my heart. And suddenly my heartbeat was being broadcast. And I remember that I said at the time, well, the good news is I'm alive. So even in person, there are technical issues. Thank you.
True. Thank you.
That's the experience of a live reading, you know. So,
Before we lose too many people, I just wanted to say that last summer we held a haiku book contest, and Sue won that contest. She has a book with us.
Keep going. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Am I muted?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. And she won that contest. And then Renee Owens, also, she was the runner-up, and we published her book as well. We're going to hold that contest again in September. So we're going to hold another contest. I hope everyone can submit if you have a body of work that you've completed. Sue is actually going to judge. I think that's the way, if we keep doing this contest each year, that we will proceed with the previous winner judging the new contest. So just wanted to make that announcement, and you'll see some promotion of that in September in the various places.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you, Crystal.
Click end on here.
I was unmuted. I mean, I was muted, and then I finally found a way to unmute it. Okay,
Okay.
I was reading. Okay.
Could I quickly ask
Yes.
everyone else to mute? Everyone who's not David? And then go ahead, David.
Okay. Baling wire, holding the fence up, the fence holding up the wire. Baling wire, holding the fence up, the fence holding up the wire. Drink slowly the stream, and it is the sudden throat chill of upland snow. Drink slowly the stream, in it is the sudden throat chill of upland snow. Bamboo flute, the lingering ache and echo of autumn wind. Bamboo flute, the lingering ache and echo of autumn wind. In the bear's footprints, I walk the empty beach, not fitting in. In the bear's footprints, I walk the empty beach, not fitting in. Reminiscing about Alaska, the third button of her blouse left wildly undone. Reminiscing about Alaska, the third button of her blouse left wildly undone. Come in her nightgown to watch the moon. I watch her. Come in her nightgown to watch the moon. I watch her. Empty mountain trail, the spread out snake shoulders its length of sun. Empty mountain trail, the spread out snake shoulders its length of sun. Sleeping on leaves, a stray cat becoming calico. Sleeping on leaves, a stray cat becoming calico. To accompany his flea scratching, a paw must thump the porch. To accompany his flea scratching, a paw must thump the porch. Beside the stream, whatever makes her whisper, makes me too. Beside the stream, whatever makes her whisper, makes me too. Picture window, a hummingbird stares at me in my cage. Picture window, a hummingbird stares at me in my cage. Winter evenings, 3 people run to answer one phone call. Winter evening, 3 people run to answer one phone call. Burying a bone at the beach he will never return to. Still his tail wags. Burying a bone at the beach he will never return to. Still his tail wags. At the waterfall, the falling stops if you watch it falling. At the waterfall, the falling stops if you watch it falling. On with the nylons, off with the nylons, a captured flea. On with the nylons, off with the nylons, the captured flea. Before crossing the paper's edge, the young spider checks its footing. Before crossing the paper's edge, the young spider checks its footing. They discuss news. Her hearing aid on high, his on low. They discuss news. Her hearing aid on high, his on low. On my knees, I welcome the new years, looking for my glasses. On my knees, I welcome the new years, looking for my glasses. Stepping off the merry-go-round, the earth spins. Stepping off the merry-go-round, the earth spins. Kneeling in the woodshed by my side, old mad winter. Kneeling in the woodshed by my side, old man winter. Walking inside the piano tuner, walking inside the grand piano, the cat tuner. Walking inside the grand piano, the cat tuner. Drugstore cowboy, his silver buckle polishes the sunset. Drugstore cowboy, his silver buckle polishes the sunset. A silence in the rose reddens the dusk. A silence in the rose reddens in the dusk. That's what I have, and thank you for the help and the interest. And I'm sorry for the complications. I think the muted finally got unmuted or whatever was going on, but I appreciate your help, everybody's help. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
David, so much. Glad we got you back.
Thank you. Yep, glad to. Good for me. Thank you.
Thanks, David.